So here's the answer to the last question that we were asking about Shannon's trip to Toronto. And the first question we were looking at is how far does Shannon travel in 1.5 hours, 2 hours, and 3.5 hours? And as before, we have to find 1.5 hours on our graph and read up to the line and then go across to the vertical axis, and we find that Shannon has driven 150 kilometers in 1.5 hours. So next we find 2 hours on our graph, go up to the line, and then across, and we find that Shannon traveled 200 kilometers in 2 hours. And the last example, we'll go over to 3.5 hours and read up to the graph, and then across, and we find that Shannon traveled 350 kilometers in 3.5 hours. Now the next question was, what is the slope of the line and how does this relate to her speed? So we're going to take the 2 points that we identified before, which is 1.5 hours and 150 kilometers, and 3.5 hours and 350 kilometers. And so what we're going to do now is look at the rise between these 2 points. And we're going from 150 up to 350, which is a rise of 200. And we read across for the run between these 2 points, so we're going from 1.5 over to 3.5, so that means our run is 2. And now what we have to do is use our slope formula, which is rise over run, so 200 over 2, which works out to be 100. Now, this is asking how it relates to her speed. Well, this means that Shannon goes 200 kilometers in 2 hours, or when we divide this, it means 100 kilometers in 1 hour. So that means that her speed is 100. And remember, we can read the rate as kilometers. So we take the units from the vertical axis and say per, so 100 kilometers per hour. And that's the rate. So remember that the slope is the rate expressed in the units of the units for the dependent variable per the independent variable units. So kilometers per hour. Now, we could also do this by using our slope formula. If we weren't given the graph, we could just take these values if we knew it was linear. And all we have to do then is sub in for y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and then we would actually get the same answer. So, moving on, what we're going to do now, and once again, Shannon is traveling at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour, and this is what we mean by how does this relate to her speed, or how does the slope relate to her trip, anything like that. We're looking for an application, so make sure that you specify exactly what that means. So the next question was, what is the y-intercept and how does this relate to her trip? Well, if we look at where it crosses the y-axis, or where it crosses the vertical axis, the y-intercept of the line is 0. And so this means if Shannon travels for 0 hours, she hasn't moved anywhere. In other words, she's sitting in her driveway in her car. All right, and next one, what is the equation of the line? And let D and H represent your variables for distance and time respectively. So D is going to be distance and T is going to be time. So the y-intercept of the line is 0. The slope of the line is 100, and this is from previous questions. And we're going to let the dependent variable be represented by D, because that's what's on the vertical axis. It's the dependent variable. And the independent variable is represented by H. So what we're going to do now is sub in for y equals mx plus b. And remember that y is the dependent variable, so we're going to put in d for the y variable. And m was our slope, and that was 100. So we sub in 100. X is our independent variable, and here this is time in hours. And we're going to use the variable h, so we put in h. And the b is the y-intercept, which is 0. So we're going to sub in 0 for the b. And we can just leave out the 0 because it's we're not adding anything, so we can just ignore it. And this is a case of what we call direct variation, because there is no b. And therefore, Shannon's distance traveled is calculated by multiplying the number of hours she has been traveling by 100. So in other words, if she's been traveling for 2 hours, it's 100 times 2, so the distance is 200. So what we're going to do now is move on and try this question and then check your answer in the next video.